Texas Longhorns went to Tuscaloosa. We debated about it, whether or not Alabama would be able to win this even by multiple scores, or if Texas truly could pay off the hype. And guys, the Longhorns finally did win a big game, 34-24, the final score, as they knock off the Tide. This is a game that Texas really felt like they were in control in from the very get-go. They scored first. They held a 13-6 lead at half. And Quinn Ewers had his breakout game, right? There were kind of two paths that Quinn could go down. He could either step up and truly have his statement game, or he could maybe lose his job and struggle against a talented Alabama secondary. And instead, Quinn had his moment. Throws for over 395 yards, I believe, a couple of touchdowns as well. Did not turn the football over. Guys, dare I say, Texas was the better team on the field tonight, and it showed. I think they could have won this by even more than just 10 points. I didn't have the stones to outright say, yes, I'm putting this in writing that Texas will win the game on the preview. I was certainly vocal about that, leaning towards that happening in the preseason, and did take Texas plus the 7. I think Jalen Milroe got exposed tonight, guys. I really do. I feel like he is not the quarterback that a lot of Bama backers were talking him up to be this week. He had a couple of good throws, but ultimately, Trey, let's start with you. Quinn was the better quarterback by far on the field, and in these big time games, sometimes that's what it takes to come out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. Because going into this, back in our preview show this week, I said I was picking Alabama because I just hadn't seen that killer instinct from Texas under Sark yet. We've seen them play really close games, thinking back to the Alabama game last year, especially, but they just haven't been able to finish it. They haven't developed that tenacity, that whatever, winning characteristic is that winning teams have, and teams that are just a step below that don't quite have. So they finally showed it tonight. And that's a big, big step in the right direction. Credit to Coach Sark, credit to that whole team for getting in there and getting the job done. They had a lot of advantages in this game. The scheme was fantastic. There were a couple times, and we were texting back and forth, a couple times where it was teetering there in the second half, right? When Alabama goes up 16-13, you're like, oh, here we go again with a Sark coach Texas team, or really with a post 2009 Texas team where they look really, really good, and then just the bottom falls out. But credit to them. Right after that, they answer with a TD. They score 14 points in 15 seconds, I think it was. The graphic said right after that, cashing in on a really, really bad Jalen Milroe interception.
Terrible.
And you're absolutely right, Mitch. Quinn Ewers was the better quarterback tonight, and Jalen Milroe, that graphic said it all. I think they threw for barely over 100 yards tonight. And that's just not going to get it done. It's not going to get it done against Texas. It's not going to get it done in the heat of the SEC race either for Alabama. So my alarm bells are ringing extremely loud for the Crimson Tide as they go into this SEC season, because if that's the product that they're going to put on the field, it's going to be a season way, way worse than we've seen in Tuscaloosa in a long, long time. And I don't think Alabama fans are quite ready for that.
Yeah, guys. I don't know if y'all heard, but Texas is 2-0. That's what they said on the broadcast. They're trying to do anything but say Texas is back or try to blow it out of proportion. But if you listen to the commentary at the end of the game, they were really trying to blow it out of proportion. Like, this is such a transitional win for this program. They've needed something like this. And look, it was an incredible win. But look, we overreacted to week one a little bit. I'm refusing to overreact to this one. It was a fantastic win from Texas. Quinn Ewers, I said this would be his legacy game in the offseason, and I think that stands to reason that's going to help him, with his career at Texas. This is a massive win for him to kind of put up there and say, look, I can be the guy, right? There were some questions about him in the offseason and his consistency, and I was up at the front as one of his better critics, but he played a fantastic game, threw for 350 yards almost. He stayed upright, which is incredible. I mean, the defensive front did nothing for Alabama. The offensive line played a heck of a game, keeping Quinn upright and giving him enough time to throw the ball down the field. And, at the end of the day, this is a massive step in the right direction for the Longhorns. And if you're Alabama, you got to ask yourself, we've heard the rumblings, right? And it seems like the last, couple years is things haven't quite gotten the way that they want it to go. And they say, well, Georgia's won a couple back-to-back championships, and Bama, you really hadn't done all that much in the last couple of years. And, well, now your quarterback isn't what he was. And Tommy Rees, maybe he's not the offensive coordinator of your dreams. Is this the end for Bama? I'm not going to say it's the end, that they'll never win another championship or whatever, but I think it's time to start talking about, they didn't look like Bama. They didn't look like what we've come to expect Bama to look like the last, 5-10 years. And, if this continues, I wonder about their ability to get through an SEC schedule, right? There's some good teams in the SEC, definitely some flawed teams, right? Texas is the best team, or at least based on the eye test that they played so far, and probably the best they'll play this year. But I mean, there's some good teams on that schedule who can take advantage of this, who can play good defense against them and take advantage of this going forward. So they got to figure some stuff out in a hurry. I doubt they go back to Milroe as the passer. I guess long term, I think that you might see a little bit of a tryout next week on the field for a couple of the other guys, see if somebody else can bring a little bit of juice to this offense, because, man, they got to figure something out in that quarterback room.
It's not that Milroe can't pass, and just one correction. Milroe threw for 255. Bama only rushed for 107 yards.
Gotcha.
So, just flip those numbers around. But the point remains, like, it wasn't good enough to get the job done, right? Because for every punch that Alabama threw, Texas counterpunched within seconds, it felt like. Like, as soon
and with
as Alabama
haymaker too, they were punching back a lot harder than Bama was punching.
Exactly. Every moment that Alabama felt like, okay, now here comes the win, right? Here comes the wave of momentum. Texas had an answer, and credit to Steve Sarkisian, credit to Pete Kwiatkowski for putting together a phenomenal defensive game plan. The freshman Anthony Hill was all over the field. He spied Jalen Milroe for much of that game. And, Alabama gave up 22 sacks all of last year. They gave up 5 tonight. Their offensive line struggled. The penalties killed Alabama. It cost them a touchdown at the end of the first half. There were just moments where it felt like Alabama was extremely frazzled in this game, and yet they were at home. They were in the comfortable territory. It was Texas that had all the pressure on them on the road. And yet this really did feel like the coming out party for Quinn Ewers. We've had questions about his consistency his entire career, and tonight was his statement game. Garrett, you included the tight end Jatavian Sanders on there, 5 catches for $114. He had a massive 50-yard long not a touchdown, but a grab that really helped kind of put Texas in the catbird seat here. That's a name that I feel like most people don't know. He was the number 1 athlete coming out of the recruiting class a couple of years ago, out of the state of Texas, a Denton Ryan guy. And it's been fun to see him find his true place. He was a defensive guy at Denton Ryan. Texas turned him into a tight end, and it really does seem like he's blossoming. So, guys, with that, Texas answers a lot of questions. Alabama only raises more questions. Which is more of the accurate take, that Texas is a national championship contender and this game proves it, or this game proves that the Alabama dynasty is crumbling? Garrett, let's start with you.
This might be the hotter of the two takes. I think it has more to do with Bama going in the wrong direction. And that's not to take anything away from what Texas did. Texas played a hell of a football game and did really, really well tonight. And that's not take away anything from that. But let's not pretend that this is the Bama of old. Let's not pretend this is the same Bama. This might have been the knockout punch to Bama's dynasty. We might see where they go from here, and things might crumble and the team might fold. And, anything can happen in today's college football. We just talked about the transfer portal. If things go south and team culture gets bad, then, you could see a flood of exits at some point. We've seen that with lots of programs in the past and things go wrong. But, I think this has more to do with the fact that, Saban was not able to hire fantastic coordinators to replace the last couple that left. He hasn't been able to put as good of a quarterback on the field. It doesn't seem like the players are at the same level that they have been in the past. And you can say that they're, adjusting or whatever. But I think, Trey, me and you, we were watching this game towards the end, and we watched a 4-man front just basically bum rush the Bama O-line and get around the corner. And even though one of the guys is getting held, he came up with the sack. It's not as competitive as it once was. It doesn't seem as imposing, right? And Mitch, kind of to your point, you talked about how every time it felt like Bama was going to come up, Texas had an answer. That's not how Bama used to roll. Bama used to find your little mistakes and exploit you for that, right? They would find the little place where you didn't convert on the third down, and then they would extend it. They would do a little thing here, a little thing there, and just find a way to add 7 points on the board, add 10 points on the board, and kind of do that. I don't think that's where Bama is anymore. They might be able to recapture it, but that's just not who they are anymore. So Texas is really good. I want to see them maybe play against some of the better teams that we've seen this year, right? Put them up against like a Notre Dame or a Michigan or a Florida State. I think they can compete with those teams, but let me check them against some of the best before I judge them on a national scale.
Yeah, it's going to be a long roller coaster season for Texas. And I don't mean that they're going to go 7-5. I'm not saying that they're going to lose a lot of games. I think that they are going to win a ton of football games. And they very well could be a national title contender. I'm still a little bit in wait and see mode just because of what you're saying, Garrett. I don't think, listen, all off season, the national narrative about Alabama was, yeah, they have, quarterback issues. Yeah, it does look a little iffy on the surface offensively. Yeah, they're losing a lot of star players on both sides of the ball, and they're having to rely on a lot of unproven talent. But come on, it's Nick Saban. Come on, it's Nick Saban. You're really going to bet against Nick Saban? That was the national narrative that I heard all throughout preview season. And I feel like on this podcast, we were kind of beating the drum of like, yeah, Nick Saban's amazing, but you still need the Jimmies and Joes. And that's what's kind of made Nick Saban over the course of this year. That's a fantastic image right there. Wow. That kind of says it all. Picture says 1,000 words. If you're watching on YouTube, we've got.
I like this guy.
Yeah. If you're watching on YouTube, we've got Jalen Milroe on the phone with Tommy Reese up in the booth. And it is just, I don't know what Jalen's trying to explain, but Tommy is not buying it and is
not having it.
Full face palm.
Neither of them have answers right now.
Yeah, so great shot there from the broadcast, but that's kind of where Alabama's at right now, isn't it? Like, we heard that all offseason. You're really going to bet against Nick Saban? You're really going to bet against Nick Saban? I personally feel vindicated for betting against Nick Saban a little bit. And kind of sounding the alarm that this might not be a very good Alabama team this year behind the quarterback room. Now, they could make a change at quarterback and turn things around, right? We saw that in the middle of a national championship game for Nick Saban. They could go 11-1. They could win the next 11. They could beat Georgia in the SEC championship, and they could be right back in the playoff. That is still on the table for Alabama. But if you're asking me right now, is it more likely that they go 8-4 or 11-1? I'm putting my money on 8-4 after what I saw on the field tonight. So the SEC is wide open. There's not really an SEC team that scares me right now if I'm just looking, especially in the West. But Alabama's in trouble, guys. Like I'm willing to go on the record and say that Alabama is in trouble if they don't get this quarterback situation figured out. Now, next year they could get the best guy out of the portal, and we could all just be, laughing at ourselves for doubting Nick Saban, because Nick Saban's going to find a way to stay on top until he finally does decide to retire. So look for him to be very aggressive in the portal this next offseason if they don't get it figured out with who's on the roster. But I'm worried about Alabama. Now, on Texas, I really don't want to sound like a Texas hater, because they did a fantastic job today. And they deserve all the credit in the world for going into Tuscaloosa. The number of teams, you can count on one hand, the number of teams that have beaten Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa throughout his whole tenure at Alabama. So that is a fantastic job by the Longhorns. They're, right on track to have a fantastic season that their fans base has been waiting for, that the national college football landscape has been waiting for. And they can definitely do it. I think they finally have the talent. Quinn's finally shown it. It's always going to be about consistency for the Longhorns. I'm really interested to see the next few weeks how they respond. Does the standard stay high, or was this just a high one-off game? In the past, it's been a high one-off game, and I think the most honest Texas fans would agree with that we've seen these one-off highs before. If they can build that consistency, watch out. They're absolutely a national championship contender if they can get that consistent play week in and week out.
The only thing that I'm concerned about with Bama and finding a quarterback is Trey. They had the chance to do that this offseason, right? Go into the portal and pluck whoever the top guy was. And we landed on Tyler Buckner, who didn't even get into the game tonight. So Oof. We'll see.
They've got some talented freshmen too.
They
and
do.
Those freshmen, yeah.
Dylan Longren, Eli Holstein. I mean, they've got a stable of young Mustangs just kind of, bucking in their stables right now, but not the guys that you want when you need to beat a top 12 team at home. So Alabama, a lot of questions to answer. Texas, a lot of questions to answer, but more centered around, can they keep this up? Can they week in, week out prove that they won't go drop a fluky game to Baylor, that they won't go lose to Kansas here in a couple of weeks? That's what I'm focused on. But I tell you what, I feel really good about taking Texas +7. I trusted my gut in this one, and it felt like it's their time, right? Eventually it was going to turn in favor of the Longhorns, and it did for them tonight.
Gracious, how about